So our homework today is in John chapter 9, and it's the story of Jesus healing a man who's born blind. And I just love this story. This guy is so clever. But John, he sets up this encounter between Jesus and the blind man with verse 3, which says that this man was born blind so that the works of God could be displayed in him. So we have to remember that whatever happens next, the purpose of it is to show or to reveal the works of God. So what happens next?
Jesus says that as long as he is in the world, he is the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground and made mud with the dirt and his saliva and put it on the blind man's eyes. Then he told the blind man to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. The blind man went, he washed, and he came back seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this guy's neighbors, the people who knew him as the blind beggar, they immediately bring him to the Pharisees because once again, Jesus chose to heal on a Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Pharisees are not thrilled about this, and they question the blind man about what happened. And he just repeats to them what he'd said to his neighbors. I was blind, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see.
Yeah. And these Pharisees, they just don't believe that whoever healed this blind man could be sent from God because he didn't keep God's Sabbath. And so how do the people respond to this?
Well, they can't help but question the Pharisees because they wonder, how can someone who is not of God, who is a sinner, how can he do signs like this?
Mm-hmm.
They even ask the blind man what he thinks about the man who healed him. And he says, well, he's a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the Pharisees aren't really even sure that this man in front of them was actually born blind. And so they call in his parents
Mm-hmm.
to try to figure out this dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
How could their son suddenly see?
Yep.
And the parents don't want any part of it. They admit that the man is their son, but they tell the Pharisees that they're not going to answer for him, that he's old enough to answer for himself. They were scared that maybe if they gave the wrong answer,
Mm-hmm.
they'd be tossed out of the synagogue.
Mm-hmm. And so then this blind man, he's called to stand in front of the Pharisees again. And this time the Pharisees say that they know that the man who healed this blind man is a sinner. And the blind man says, I don't know, I can't say anything about that. All I know is I was blind and now I see. And so the Pharisees, they ask again, how did he heal you? And it's at this point the blind man kind of starts getting annoyed.
Yeah, he says essentially, stop asking the
Yeah.
same questions. I already told you what happened and you're not listening to me. So do you keep asking to hear me say it again because you want to become his disciples?
Yeah.
And this enrages the
Yeah.
Pharisees. And they say, you're his disciple. We're disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses. This guy, we have no idea
Yeah.
where he came from.
Well, and the blind man gets really cheeky here. And he says, well, isn't that something?
Yeah.
He opened my eyes, but you don't know where he comes from. The scriptures tell us that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he does listen to those who do his will. And here I am, a man who was born blind, but now I see. Would I be standing in front of you seeing if he wasn't from God?
Mm-hmm.
So they're livid
Yeah.
that someone who in their mind had been born in sin is trying to teach them anything. And they throw him out of the synagogue.
Mm-hmm. And it's at this point that Jesus finds him again. And this time he asks a question. He says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And this guy who was once blind, he says to Jesus, who is he so that I can believe in him? So why wouldn't this man have recognized Jesus?
Well, he was born blind. He'd
Exactly.
actually never seen him.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jesus says to him, well, now you do, because I'm he. I'm the Son of Man that's speaking to you. And this man, he says, Lord, which means master, I believe. And then he worshiped Jesus. And that is what I love about this man. He starts out knowing very little at all. But every time he gets this new piece of revelation, he steps forward in faith. He takes just that next step forward. And so what does Jesus say after the blind man worships him?
He says that he came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and that those who do see may become blind. It is the great reversal. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Those who think that they have all the answers apart from God, from Jesus, will find out that they don't. And those who know that they have no answers apart from Jesus will find out that they have the only answer they need.
Well, and the Pharisees, they overhear this exchange. And probably they're cluing in that, I wonder if he's talking to us. And so they ask Jesus a question. They say, are we blind? And Jesus answers that question for them in John chapter 10. And it's a chapter about sheep and a shepherd. And that might sound odd to you. How is the answer to the question, are we blind, found in Jesus as the good shepherd? But if you want to see how they connect, you have to tune in for our next teaching session. So we're going to close today with Proverbs 26:12. And it says that, do you see a man who is wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. And so you might be wondering what the answer is to the question, am I blind too? But you don't need to worry and wonder, because if you are spiritually blind, the answer to that spiritual blindness is the one who gives sight to the blind. And so we are all invited to come, and we are enabled to see who Jesus is. So see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.